Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Sushant, sir.
Okay, can we go ahead and start?
Uh, I think if we have all the panelists, I think we can start within 5 minutes. Yeah, we can now begin. We can start.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to this conference on artificial intelligence and law. I'm very honored and privileged to be part of this very beautiful, educative, informative conference. And it's been lovely to connect up with professionals all over the globe, specifically to talk about something that's very, very interesting, that's going to completely become a new paradigm altogether. It's on artificial intelligence and law. And I'm Advocate Sai Sushant, a cyber law expert and techno-legal consultant, CEO Sushant IT Law Associates. I would be hosting this particular panel discussion on decrypting AI and the kind of policy regulations. So, first of all, I practice in the area of cyber laws and technology related laws. And more specifically, I'm very delighted to be part of this conference. And I'm also an expert panel member on law, technology, and international affairs for Indian Society of Artificial Intelligence and Law. And I must once again congratulate them for their thought leadership in coming up with this beautiful conference and conclave to decipher the various kinds of legal policy regulatory aspects surrounding article. Once again, thank the organizers and also Abhivardhan in person for this wonderful thought process. So that's something about me. And I have with me four wonderful panelists who would now be part of this panel discussion. First of all, I would like to introduce all my panelists to you. Mr. Christoph, and we have Ms. Bodgan, we have Ms. Luna and Mr. Sebastian as our panelists today for this panel discussion on decrypting AI regulation and its policy dynamics. So I'm just trying in the possible manner so that we could at least come up with some outcome document which could help in the kind of policy frameworks with regard to artificial intelligence. So first, I would like to introduce the first panelist for today, Mr. Sebastian. Mr. Sebastian is a Crown Counsel for the Public Prosecution Service of Canada and is a member of the Law Society of Ontario and of the Law Society of Quebec. He also worked as a counsel for the law branch of Supreme Court of Canada. Welcome, Mr. Sebastian. Welcome to the panel. It's immense pleasure welcoming you to this wonderful discussion. Then I would like to welcome Ms.
Thank you,
Luna.
sir.
She's a partner and data protection officer at CARM Legal Consultants. She is an ambassador, advisor, and partner of the FinTech Working Group of the Arab Monetary Fund. She is a member of the Legal Practice Council of South Africa. Welcome, Ms. Luna, to this panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Sushant. Lovely to be here.
And thank you. We have the third panelist, Mr. Bodgan. Mr. Bodgan is an AI platform manager at Combined Intelligence. He is engaged in large-scale implementations of the communications platform worldwide. He has led the implementation of an AI platform at MNS, underpinning conversational experiences for customers calling retail services and contact centers. And we have one more great panelist with us, Mr. Christoph. Mr. Christoph is the director of TUM Institute for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence at the Technical University of Munich. He holds the Peter Loscher Chair in Business Ethics at the Technical University. He's been a member of the Ethics Commission on Automated and Connected Driving of the German Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure, as well as of the European AI Ethics Initiative, AI for People. Welcome, Mr. Christoph. It's been great welcoming you on the panel today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Looking forward to your discussion.
Thank you so much. Uh, so AI is started to emerge as a constant life companion when you look at the landscape of AI today. And no matter whatever be the business and the profession, I think artificial intelligence is trying to be a part and parcel of every profession today. And it's the life of AI that's going to be the future, whether it be it in the engineering or the medical line or the legal front or any of the business communities and things like that. So I think it's very, very important that we come up with some kind of legal framework and policies with regard to AI and the kind of impact that AI has on business. So I think with this short note, we'll we'll get started with our panel discussion. So I would request each of the panelists to give their opening comments in just 2 minutes. So can we start off with Mr. Christoph?
Yeah, thank you very much. I believe we are at a crucial point in the development of AI and also of AI ethics. We have seen now substantial developments in AI within the last years, developments that probably many would not have thought possible for a while. And we have also seen the rise of AI ethics during the last roughly 2 years, maybe. Why is that? Because I, as a director of an Institute for Ethics in AI, I keep getting asked that why is ethics and also regulation so important now? I believe that companies and also other organizations, as well as policymakers and civil society organizations, are increasingly recognizing that AI will not fly without ethics, as I like to say. We will not see AI widely implemented and used on a large scale without people having the trust necessary to use these systems. So I believe the ethical rules as well as regulation and policy for AI is very important now to advance the technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Christoph. I think we got a very good opening view. I definitely agree with you that AI and ethics is going to be one of the very key aspects of the coming up with AI regularization and policies. Thank you so much. Could we have Ms. Luna for her opening comments, please?
Yes, thank you, Sushant. I agree very much with what Mr. Christoph has just said. You know, we're a firm believer of ethics, and together with ethics, hand in hand goes respect for the law and regulation of certain things. And built therein would be a respect for, you know, just general principled rights of privacy, you know, various other security measures, etc., that are necessary to be addressed in the context of discussions of AI and the advancement of AI. Very importantly as well, and like Mr. Christoph has said, is that for the advancement of AI and the increased adoption of this technology and the innovation within the field of AI, there needs to be trust at the heart thereof. So to gauge consumer trust, it needs to be a secure technology of that nature that's principled and ethically so carried out in its actual build and progression.
Thank you so much, Ms. Luna, for that opening comments. And could we have Mr. Botgan for your opening comments, please?
Yes, so in addition to what's been said by Christoph and Luna, let me give you an example, a recent example of the unknowns of AI systems. In Wisconsin, I think, down in a US state recently, there was an accused of a felony in a court of law, and the accused wanted to challenge the decision of the judge. Turns out that the judge's decision was based, or largely based, on the outcome or the output of an AI system. And at the request of the defendant, the judge made inquiry, how to explain that output. I mean, just give an explanation of why do you have that, so that the defendant can understand why the decision was being made. And he couldn't get that because there was intellectual property laws, a commercial secret, if you want. And so the owners of the AI system refuse to explain because they say we have to give up our commercial system, our commercial secrets. So we can't do that. But what that means, so the person ended up with a criminal record. That's it, condemned. But the thing is, the human rights were basically affected here, because one of the fundamental human rights is the right to challenge a judicial decision, with arguments, of course, not for the sake of it. And so because there's no legislation in the AI systems domain right now, in this case, intellectual property rights took precedence over human rights. That's all I wanted to say, human rights.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bogdan, and for the wonderful opening remarks. And could we have Mr. Sebastian for his opening comments, please?
Yes, absolutely. A pleasure to be with all of you today. And just before I make my introductory comments, I swear that I didn't talk to Mr. Bogdan Grigorescu before, but there is a clear connection with what I would like to say and what he just said at the end of this. So the connection on human rights and artificial intelligence. In the context of regulation, if we just take the example of the scoring system in China, for example, like the invasion of privacy, there are serious concerns when it comes to regulation or the lack of regulation. Mr. Grigorescu was mentioning a case from the United States, and that this is a country where regulation of artificial intelligence is unfortunately lacking as opposed to other countries or the European Union, for example. But still, there are gaps in those organizations or groups, shall I say. But again, I also agree with the two. It's not a matter of agreeing, but I also found quite interesting what the first two, and we're all on the same page. But again, no consultation with Mr. Grigorescu, but there's a connection with human rights here for sure, and I couldn't agree more with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sebastian, for your opening comments. And one request I would like to make to all the panelists is, could you please stay for 6 more minutes after the panel discussion? So it will be good to have all of you again for 6 more minutes once we conclude the panel discussion. So I just thought I should intimate I got the information from the organizer requesting you to be there online for 6 minutes once the panel is concluded. So let's get to some discussion. Mr. Christoph, I would like to start with you. So when you started talking about the ethical risks, so what do you think are the ethical risks to AI, specifically from a business perspective? And how do you think that this can be actually managed or averted?
I didn't get the last part, but I assume we were talking about the ethical risks of AI to business. So, I mean, there are a number of risks, ethical risks associated with AI. And some of them we have seen in cases that have recently turned up in the press as well. There is first, there are risks with damages or even fatalities. Obviously, with autonomous cars, we have seen that. We have some cases already. That is not actually much different, I would say, in general from other technological systems where we also see these risks. However, we see additional risks, for example, in terms of discrimination. So AI systems that might systematically discriminate against certain parts of the population for different reasons. We see risks in terms of security, obviously, so hacking into systems and while doing all sorts of things with these systems. That is in risk in itself. Maybe again, this one we have also with quite different systems, different than AI. We have risk of increase in invasion into sea, as well as quite related surveillance risks. So what does an increasing of surveillance mean for a society? Those are risks that companies will be facing. And why are they important for companies? So it won't be. We are talking about AI governance, about AI ethics, AI regulation a lot these days, but it will ultimately be the companies who have to implement rules and standards for these. While in the absence of AI regulation, and even in the EU also, we do not yet have an effective AI regulation. We have something about the GDPR, so privacy, but not really about AI regulation. There is talk about this currently in the EU administration, but when we will see that is still open, I would say. So in the absence of that, I think it's a huge responsibility for companies to come up with other rules for these systems to be governed in order to gain the necessary trust to make AI trustworthy. And I would not say this is a weak sword, basically, but actually something that can be quite sharp. Because companies face reputational risks. So if an AV kills people, that definitely damages the reputation of the company manufactured it. Or if an algorithm for determining creditworthiness turns out to be systematically discriminatory, this is a risk for the company's reputation. In addition, we have seen in many other areas substantially increased legal fines for example, for discrimination and for other wrongdoings. Just take one example: Volkswagen had to pay around almost 30 billion euros for the Dieselgate scandal, which is, even for such a large company, is very substantial. So that is why companies should take these, and we will see the same in terms of AI. So that's why they should really take this very seriously and give us, even as I said, in the absence of regulation, do something on their own to come up with ethical guidelines, tools, and other things for their systems, because it will actually help them. It will help their products and their sales.
Thank you so much for your views, Mr. Christoph. Now I would like to go to Mr. Sebastian. Continuing with the same discussion, we risks on AI from an ethical perspective. Now, I just want to take this question a bit more further to you. What do you see? What kind of new era concerns do you see from an AI perspective? And do you think we need to relook at the regulatory efforts being taken?
Thank you very much for the question. So let me just, if I may, pull up a PowerPoint that I prepared for just give me 2 seconds, if I may ask very respectfully. Apologize for that. Just that the PowerPoint is very useful. Okay. Okay, seemingly I cannot upload it. Let me send it to all of you guys in the chat box, if I may send a PowerPoint here. Okay, seemingly I can't, but I don't want to take too much time to so sorry about this inconvenience here. But so what I will say, the error concerns, and of course, please feel free to ask me for the PowerPoint or ask the organizers, and I can send them the PowerPoint if you deem it relevant and interesting enough for your fields of expertise and interests. So basically, what are new concerns? So privacy was mentioned, and that's one of the key human rights that are impacted by I would say there are many human rights touched upon, freedom of expression, et cetera, but one of the key concerns I would say is definitely privacy issues by the invasion, between quotes, of the means, that the technological ways of dealing with things that is offered and available more and more by artificial intelligence. I did mention earlier the lack of regulation and the inequality between countries about this. We do have, well, not we, but the European Union, as mentioned before, they have the GDPR, but in the United States, they don't have much, if any, regulation about specifically dedicated to artificial intelligence. And these things are all in the context of, there's a quote that I found quite interesting from Theresa May, the former British Prime Minister, who said that in a global digital age, we need the norms and rules we establish to be shared by all. This includes establishing the rules and standards that can make the most of artificial intelligence in a responsible way, such as by ensuring that algorithms do not perpetuate their human biases of their developers. So, of course, biases or some articles have been written, interestingly, about possible racism or discrimination. So the new era concerns. Basically, there's a big, in a very short perspective, there are many things. So artificial intelligence, we cannot touch it. It's not palpable, tangible, but it does have plenty of serious concerns that are posed in this new era and in the context of the development of artificial intelligence. I touched upon briefly earlier the Chinese scoring system, which basically is not regulated per se as for now in China. And so basically what is reported is by 2025, China will have basically seen the initial establishment of artificial intelligence laws and regulations, ethical norms, and policy systems. But for now, what do we have in the country, in China? Well, pretty opaque, pretty nothing. That is, of course, there's a few documents that address it, but it's very vague and not directly addressed in terms of human rights. But China is not alone. There are other countries. I mentioned the United States. They invested. It's not because the United States are not interested. They invested a lot of money. There are a lot of investments in artificial intelligence, but there is still a big hole, if I may say it very respectfully, but a big gap in terms of regulation there, and not to mention the GDPR was discussed earlier. So and also it's all domestic, right? But artificial intelligence, it doesn't care about borders, about the nation-state system. The Westphalian, to talk in political science terms, there's no borders in artificial intelligence, so there's no customs and such things. So should we and can we have international regulations at some point. Well, there's many a twixt between the cup and the lip, Shakespeare would say, but I think it is applicable to the field of artificial intelligence as well. So there's also, on top of it all, this problem. Domestic regulation and laws as opposed to international laws and regulations. So where are we right now? It's pretty evolving and should definitely be looked at to answer the question and finish on this year. It should be looked at very, very, very soon, or as soon as possible, and many more efforts should be done and taken about this for sure from all countries and institutions, even though some i.e. The EU has taken further steps more than, for example, China or the United States. Thanks.
Thank you so much for putting your viewpoints and highlighting the kind of era concerns and also the regulatory efforts. We got a good insight on GDPR and the United States approach. Thank you so much. I would now go on to Ms. Luna. I wanted to just take this discussion more further. Could you please highlight on the legal tech AI products and what kind of risks are associated with them?
Absolutely, Sushant. Thank you so much. So, by its definition, legal technology is the use of technology and software for the provision and support of legal services in the legal industry. These are meant to be disruptive technologies which have and continue to change the traditionalist approach to conducting legal practice, which until now has still been very much conservative, with lawyers being dubbed to be paper pushers. I very much push against this definition because we are a digitally native law firm and proud to say so. Focusing on newer age technology primarily and aiding these technologies in the move forward. But legal technology can help traditionalist practice services like practice management, assist the aid of remote working, whether someone's traveling or whether there's some kind of restriction or incumbency in respect thereof, as is present now with the COVID-19 situation, then also with the electronic discovery of documents, billing, accounting, whether it's setting up of appointments or consultation, scheduling, etc. So by definition, actually, legal technology can possibly replace the traditional roles that any paralegal or researchers could conduct within a law firm, which is the scary truth. And that's why we need to advance ourselves and become relevant to this age that we presently find ourselves in. Further technology offerings of legal technology include lawyer matching services on various platforms where consortiums of legal practitioners come together, and one can literally go on the internet and pick and choose a relevant practitioner to assist you. Also, in respect of eliminating services that were previously performed by lawyers, like document verification, the effecting of property transfers, registry updates, etc. The American Bar Association has taken a leap forward here on and has actually promulgated a rule for all legal persons of the legal profession in their model rules of professional conduct, whereby lawyers must actually keep abreast, and they are mandated to keep abreast of technology by also understanding the benefits and the risks of such technologies. So I want to also just come back to what Mr. Bogdan has said, and this is a classic example where AI technology was used in the court systems for fine violators in terms of traffic offences. And what they'd actually found, and this is in the state of Florida, is that the biases that were built into that technology had found persons of a certain race and colour to be automatically found guilty because of the biases that were built into that system. And when they had to discover as to why this had occurred, they didn't have to even go into the algorithms itself, but the biases that were built in, because this technology had actually learned from judgments that were handed down by previous judges in that jurisdiction. And that raised a question there of, those biases. So biases are correct to apply. There must be biases integrated into this technology and the algorithms. However, it must be a correct and fair bias at that. Then also, we've discussed the risk of personal or exposure of personal data, reputation, cyber-related risks, even AI terrorism. And then also one of the other risks involved is the identification of certain correlations. For example, where legal technology can match a person that is a low-income earner to automatically, by its standards, be of a greater risk and bear the propensity to commit some or other type of crime. Legal technology, from an Indian perspective, I can tell you, has been implemented by the court with the introduction made at the announcement at the the Indian National Constitution Day on the 26th of November 2019 for the launch of a natural machine translation tool for the translation of judgments and orders that are handed down by the court to be automatically translated into 9 vernacular languages. So this is one of the positives that we can see through the introduction of legal technology in the field of law. Thank you, Sushant.
Thank you, Luna, for the concise viewpoint. And I'm of the firm opinion that the cyber security is also an important paradigm that will have to be considered in this regard, more specifically when we have legal tech AI products, because I think cyber security and the data breaches would have to be really considered as some of the important risks to add to your viewpoint. Thank you so much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Bogdan, over to you. I just wanted to get some light on what kind of, could you just talk about the accountable automation in public agencies, and why is it assuming a very great importance, and what are the developments that have been taking place thereof?
I think I have 5 minutes, which is this is pretty huge. I try to summarize a little bit. So AI systems are not morally accountable agents. And what that means, it means we have an ethical breach in the applied science of AI. So the target principles, fairness, accountability, sustainability, transparency, these are meant to fill the gap between what we call now the new smart agency of machines and the fundamental lack of moral responsibility. So target principles, fairness, accountability, sustainability, and transparency. Apply them. This is a critical method to use. Obviously, how it will be used, it will vary, but when defining a framework, this would be the pillars. And so we have to have accountability by design, not later, but starting with it. So what that means, that all AI systems have to be designed to facilitate the end-to-end answerability and auditability, which means that we have to have humans in the loop at certain places, not all over the place, and not just everyone, the right person in the right place, which are responsible. And it's across the entire design and the entire implementation chain. We also have to have the activity monitoring protocols, so to enable the end-to-end oversight and review. So this observability of the whole system. They go hand in hand, of course. Specifically for the public sector, not just for the public sector, I just want to mention the public sector accountability. There are two big challenges to address. One is the accountability gap, and the other is the complexity of the AI systems production processes, i.e. to get them in life at scale and manage change and so back and so forth. That's complex. So on the accountability gap, the all automated decisions cannot justify themselves, you know. And so when people are involved, human agents can be called to account for the action that they take when those actions affect the lives of others. But the models, the hardware, and the software that compose AI systems are not responsible in the same morally relevant way as people. So what we have here is an accountability gap, and this needs addressing so that we have clear imputable sources of human answerability that we can attach to decisions that are based or assisted by outputs of AI systems. On the complexity issue, so to establish human answerability is not easy or simple when we have AI systems involved, wherever there's design, deployment, or mixture. And this is because there's a lot of complexity in multi-agent, in the characteristic of the multi-agent that is part of the development and use of AI systems. It's not one monolithic agent, it's several. And I think Luna mentioned about it. You have outcome from one algorithm that is input for another algorithm, and so back and so forth. And in the end, you have an output. And so going back to it to explain it, it's very, very difficult and complex. And so on production, productionizing this kind of systems, what's involved? So the project workflows includes many moving parts, delivery leads and department leads or heads, tech experts, people involved in data procurement and data preparation. You have policy experts, domain experts, implementers, change managers, and a few others. So it's a complex landscape on the human side, but it's also a complex landscape on the footprint, on the technical side. So we have this production complexity, which renders difficult to answer where responsibility lies, with whom. If something goes wrong, who is responsible and for what? It is difficult to establish that. That's the second challenge. And so to answer the second part of it, you know, what's been done, what should be done, I rather think, is to make it accountable. Implementation of these AI systems have to be rendered accountable, which means, again, two elements, I would say: who is accountable, i.e. answerability, and how are the relevant people held to account? I mean, they designate being accountable, but how you ensure that they actually perform on that accountability. So the auditability element. So it's essential to establish a continuous chain of human responsibility across the whole of the AI project delivery workflow, from the start to the end and throughout, not just at the end, not just at the beginning. It's continuous. And the explanation, justification of the content of the decision that are supported by algorithm output, as well as the processes that are behind them, they have to be offered by the right human authorities, but in a language that everyone can understand, not in cryptic languages, not language that only lawyers can understand, or language that only technical experts can understand. In plain English, if I can say that, or in plain German if it's in a German jurisdiction, and so on, and also coherent. And on the auditability front, the AI system has to be accessible for audit, for starters, for audit, for oversight, and for critical review. So keeping records, making them accessible, the relevant data that comes out of monitoring of the AI systems, that has to be made available. The data provenance, where that data comes from and what is it? The stages in the data analysis, they have to be made available and transparent for the right authorities. And also how are they processed and modeled? I think my time is up. There's a lot more to talk about it, but these are the elements that should be put in place.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bogdan. Thank you for enlightening us with your viewpoints and being brief in your views. Thank you so much. And I believe at this point, there is no denying the fact that definitely somewhere down the line, AI regulation and regularization would have to definitely be considered and would be of immense importance to have some kinds of legal regulatory framework for AI so as to address the various issues that have been spoken of. And Mr. Sebastian, coming back to you, I just wanted to get your view on what do you think are the policy constraints in AI regularization, and how do you think we should be able to tackle them?
Very briefly, the problem, well, the main problem I would say is the fact that there is no, like I mentioned earlier, there's no borders with AI. So the problem is the fact that various domestic or regional, like the EU, so the regulations are not, they're uneven. So some areas of the world are not so much regulated, if not at all, namely China and the United States, for example. And so it's for various reasons. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the EU with the GDPR, which is not necessarily best of the best, but at least it is something at the very least, and it is important. So how we should tackle them. Big challenge, of course, but there should be, ideally, of course, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but an internationally binding legal instrument, regulation, which would go and protect basic things. All speakers mentioned a few of them earlier today. For example, data protection, data privacy, and so on. I will finish this just by saying that basically democracy is at stake here. When we have countries that understand the idea of the free market, or from the United States, for example, or the idea of the state-centered economy, i.e. China, to take two opposites here that don't have basically regulations. China has a few regulations, but it's not really one legal instrument. It's all over the place. The United States, it's not so much anything, basically, in terms of, so there are challenges. So how do you make all these countries speak to each other, establish internationally binding regulation? Big challenge, but it is required because democracy is at stake, privacy is at stake, data protection, for example, is seriously challenged by the security scoring, not the security, I'm sorry, but the scoring system in China. That's one example. Or if you take a pure example of capitalist economic system, access, a waiver of private data can be done also in those systems. So it's not a matter of being a so-called communist country or so on, but basic human rights. So how do we tackle it? Big challenge. United Nations, maybe, regional organizations, maybe, international conference of representatives of states, maybe. There are various solutions, but it's got to be done because it may change our future and the future of our human rights. So it is required, and for sure for the entire planet, basically. But is it going to be done soon? I don't know. I don't think so. For now, we should tackle it at the domestic level. It is more realistic, or regional level. Thinking about the European Union, which is a bit more advanced than several other countries, Canada, for example, or the United States, to just name these. But that causes and poses serious challenges of many kinds that must be addressed. So that's one of the ways, internationally binding legal instrument, but it's perhaps too idealistic at this point, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your views, Mr. Sebastian. I think now I'm assuming that from the statements that you have made, artificial intelligence has made geography a history. I think I can definitely come to that kind of a conclusion. And more specifically, like you mentioned rightly, that two ways of looking at it is to have one way is to have an international legal framework on artificial intelligence, which sets forth the common denominators and norms of behavior that is to be adopted at a global level, and as also in the domestic front, where countries have already started to think on coming up with distinctive legislations on artificial intelligence. I think thank you so much for giving us some light on the policy constraints. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Over to you, Mr. Christoph. I just wanted to take this discussion a bit more further. So now, in the absence of the legal regulatory framework, now how effective do you think are the ethical regulations, and what kind of ethical regulatory framework you think should be adopted so that we can start trusting up technologies like autonomous vehicles or AI-based healthcare or AI-based education and things like that?
Thank you. I would like to discuss this question in conjunction with something that has been brought up in the chat, and that was whether the normative culture is enough resources to develop for dealing with the issues of AI ethics. And I believe certainly our normative resources are important, but they are not the entire story. I think for developing ethical guidelines for AI, we will need something different as well. So far, in the last 2 years, roughly, we have seen a number of these high-level abstract frameworks for AI ethics, which is good to have, and we have seen this in a number of places around the world, not just in the Western world. But now it's time to go beyond that and to get to a level where you actually work together with the developers, with the companies, with the startups that are working on AI, to see what does it mean for the level of the concrete systems. And we need to go to that stage. That's something we are doing at my institute here in Munich. So in all our research groups, and we're also working together with companies as well as other organizations, we always have people from the technical side as well as people from the humanities and social side. So with competencies in fields of ethics, of law, and social sciences in general. And that is very important. And we need those additional skills. And companies are recognizing that and turning to us and saying, oh, well, we are working on this and that AI system, but we are recognizing that there might be ethical aspects to it, but we don't know what we should do. And so we need guidance here, not just on this abstract level, but on the level of more detail, which means we need, of course, the competencies of the computer science and engineering or medicine people. It won't fly without them. But we also need the competencies of people who have these, who have them in ethics, in law and social science. But only in this interdisciplinary cooperation, I think we will be able to arrive at ethical guidelines, of standards, of toolboxes, and other maybe pieces of software in order to actually implement something on this more concrete level for AI ethics.
Thank you so much, Mr. Christoph, for giving us some direction on the kind of ethical regulatory frameworks. Thank you so much. We got a good insight on it.
If I may,
Now,
just 2 seconds, if I may. Very interesting, Mr. Ludger. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I had to say it. It was quite on point and amazing. So thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Luna. When we talk of regulatory aspects and regulatory frameworks for AI, I think definitely we'll have to also keep in mind the kind of innovation that would also have to be addressed. So, what do you think would be appropriate legal regulatory framework for AI, specifically keeping in view the innovation point?
So, Sushant, my esteemed fellow speakers today on the panel have sufficiently covered all of these points, but I'd just like to highlight them again. Transparency is a very important consideration. Second to that, also fairness. Thirdly, accountability, and Mr. Bogdan gave us a breakdown about that accountability from an end-to-end perspective. Also, then future-proofing such technology for that which may come, encouraging strong data privacy laws and regulations regarding this technology, together with that also cyber resilience, and all of these things combined to do so by design as well as by default. So by design, like Mr. Bogdan said, also integrated into the technology from its design phase and not implemented merely as an afterthought. That's very, very important. And then also by default, as per such regulation that would supervise and govern such technologies and the implementation and use thereof. So something that's also very, very important is that AI systems and machine learning technologies and their predictive algorithms are based largely on the quality and type of data. So that also in itself has a distinctive responsibility insofar as the type and quality of data is concerned. There was a question also from one of the ladies on the chat group about global bodies that look at AI itself, and my fellow colleagues have discussed some of these bodies, and the problem therein lies is that various bodies such as the OECD have published only recommendations on AI. During May 2019. The G20 had published AI principles also in 2019. The World Economic Forum had published AI government procurement guidelines in 2020. And then also the EU had published its draft strategy paper on regulating AI. This is all in general overseen by the UN, but obviously only to the countries that are subscribed and under the umbrella body of the UN. One of the very principled thing, and also from an ethics perspective that I could just mention herein, is that there is an agreement between all the bodies governed under the UN that no country or entity would undertake the build of AI technology so that it gains consciousness. So it's that next phase of AI where people often think of AI as being these machines and robots that walk around like the Terminator. I think that is what is meant thereby. Let it not gain consciousness, and let us not go that far where it actually impedes on human ethics.
Thank you so much for your concise view. If I were to add something to your view, I think while retaining the AI legal framework on one side and also innovation, I think intellectual property would be one of the key areas which will have to be properly assessed. And I think norms of intellectual property standards would have to be defined, because we've seen the recent case where the US PTO has made a firm statement that AI cannot be an innovator by itself. So I think that's also something that would have to be looked at. I'm of the opinion that
I agree with you 100%, and that's where transparency and accountability will come into play very much. That's where that that there cannot be that blanket coverage through IP protection, etc. There will have to be transparency in terms of that technology as well as accountability. Mr. Bogdan had also just mentioned that it is difficult to establish accountability, but the means to do so must at least be there, and the possibility of doing so must at least be there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Luna. And moving on to Mr. Bogdan, all along we've been starting to think that everything that we're discussing is artificial general intelligence. But however, I think the artificial general intelligence is not yet achieved, and nobody has any clue if this can be practically achievable. But every intelligent technology is probably a high-end machine learning. And do you think it's very premature at this minute for an AI regulation? And are we approaching AI regulation in the wrong way? What is your view on it?
Some people say AGI, artificial general intelligence, will never be achieved. I don't know. Is not here, but that's not the point. The point is we have AI right now, AI systems right now. They penetrate almost every aspect of people's lives, and most of the time people are not even aware of that. We may have it here to improve the definition of the picture on our screen when we talk through Google Meet, for example, and better sound and so on. Regulation for AI is on the back foot, is behind, it's overdue. The reason for that is partially due because of the speed of change in automation, which is fastest than ever in the history of humankind. And as we all know, the law needs time because there are so many moving parts. It can't be fast. So no, it's not too late. We desperately need laws around this, and the sooner the better. So we've seen numerous examples, just to mention the two big use cases, deepfakes and fake news, high impact areas. We also have examples of the impact on human rights already. Those, judicial decision, I mentioned one in the opening, that are taken based on output from AI systems that can't really be explained, and then other laws, rights like intellectual property rights taking precedence over human rights. We've seen that too already. So it's imperative we have regulation at work soon, but not just dictatorial, like super heavy and bureaucratic that nobody really understands and you can't do anything. So not too heavy to stifle innovation, but on the same time, really thorough and enforceable, so that it can actually prevent and reduce and mitigate the majority of issues that the AI systems domain has brought. And I just want to make one point, which is not directly related, but is at the root cause of all these issues. People do not own their data. I don't own my data. Nobody on this panel and in this discussion owns their data. President Trump doesn't own his own data. Just a question to all of you to understand why I'm saying that is, you are logging on and browse the internet and log on to a social media platform. This is just one example. Do you actually know what is being collected from you? I mean, obviously the click and this and that, but that's not all. The type of device you're using, that's collected. Not the serial number, but the type of device. Is it mobile? Is it not? If it's not, what type is it? MacBook Pro? I'm on a MacBook Pro. That's collected. The OS, the operating system. The unique ID of the internet session you have with your ISP, that's also collected. The browser and the version to the .release, that's collected. your location. If you have GPS turned on, location services, that's collected. So they even know that your address. If that's turned off, you're gonna have the area of the ISP, because the ISP works on regions. So they will not just know your city, but also your neighborhood where you're connected. Obviously, is that not an exact address? It's a probably like a 2-3 miles radius, but nevertheless, that's less than 1% narrowed down by more than 99% of your location. It's a lot more. People don't even know exactly what's being collected, but it's their data. It's their data. And do you know where the data goes? You'd say, well, it goes to, I don't know, Facebook or wherever. Well, no, it goes there, but not just there. It goes to the ISP first. And guess what? From the ISP, it can go to many places that you don't know, you don't control, and you don't have any say in it. Regardless of GDPR, you don't have any say in it. If somebody pays the ISP legally to get that data or part of that data, tough. You can't say anything. You don't even know about that. So we do not own our data, and data travels across jurisdictions, across borders. I think everybody agrees with that, in ways that nobody can foresee sometimes. There are some known cases, some known ways, but there are also a lot of unknown unknowns. And so this is the root of all, intellectual property rights in relation to AI systems, privacy, personal security, and so transparency, and so back and so forth. If people own the data, it's a very different story, but they don't.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bogdan. I think you've made us realize that ownership of data is one of the major aspects that we have to consider, and how exposed we could be to the kind of data being collected without our knowledge. And a very valid point about privacy here, because the moment you do not have any ownership on the data, I think the privacy would be evaporated instantaneously. I think it's a very concise and succinct viewpoint. Thank you so much for enlightening us.
Just one more thing, GDPR, it's obsolete already. It's obsolete because I'll tell you why. GDPR was ready in mid-2017. There was a 9-month grace period for businesses to have time to implement, right? It's not easy. And so that went into force May 2018. Now, the thing is, GDPR was designed between 2013 or about and 2017, and when it was ready. So we're talking legislation that was around, it's give or take 3 to 5 years old, up to 7 years old in design. It was just fine for 2017. Between 2017 and today, 33 and a half years, the change is so big that is undescribable in words. It's undescribable. And EU is already engaged in changing GDPR to be up to date since about, more than a year now. So they're doing the right thing. International community does the right thing, but it takes time. And so coming back to the ownership of data, if people would own their data, this exercise will be much faster. Because pressure will be applied, right? Pressure will be applied on all these decisional factors.
Correct. So definitely I agree with you that we cannot be in the 20th century. We cannot have a 20th century mind to tackle the 21st century issues. I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for the enlightening viewpoint. And with this, we come to the end of this panel discussion on decrypting AI regularization and its policy dynamics. So to summarize and then to give you a small overview on the discussion, we discussed on the kinds of considerations, be it ethical, moral, and legal, and also some viewpoints on the accountability, and also try to go and talk about the legal tech AI products and how artificial intelligence can help the legal industry, and the kinds of risks, whether it's the privacy, data protection, cybersecurity and moral and ethical standards, intellectual property, and things like that. We had a very insightful discussion from this panel, and we were very lucky enough to have four eminent panelists contributing in their own manner to this particular panel discussion. And I can tell you that these kinds of deliberations will set forth and propel some kind of direction in the AI jurisprudence. And I think it's time to renovate ourselves. And I think the conference is trying to reflect on how the AI jurisprudence is evolving as time passes by. And thank you all the panelists once again, and thank you for your time and valuable viewpoints. And once again, I would like to express heartfelt thanks to Indian Society of Artificial Intelligence and Law and the team, and also Abhivardhan in person for this brilliant idea of coming up with the conference on National Conference on Artificial Intelligence and Law. Thank you so much. It's really been pleasure.